Hello, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create FPS controller inside Unity. So, let's get started. Here is our scene. I have a character and I simply set it up this scene and nothing else. So our player will only have this animator component. We need some component to attach onto our uh, layer. So for this video I'm going to use rigid body because we don't want to write any extra code to deal with physics. So rigid body will having already built in some kind of function that will useful when we are dealing with physics. So that's why I'm using rigid body. So I'm just going to freeze our rotation uh, and interpolation to interpolate, and just going to change mass to 60 and just attach an capsule collider. So um, now just I'm going to adjust our capsule collider. Okay, now looks good. So to set up our camera, we need to create an empty game object under our head bone. So I'm going to just find my head bone, and so under our head bone, I'm going to create an empty game object. We're just going to inherit the position of this game object onto our camera, because we don't want any kind of rotation onto our camera affected by head bone. So why I have created this empty game object under our head bone? Because we have to adjust our camera position. So in this case, when we are creating an empty game object under our head bone, so we have control over our camera position, so we can adjust our camera position using this empty game object. So let me put something like point 2 and point 3 z position. So I think this position is fine for our camera, because this is in front of our eyes, and when we inherit the position of this game object, then our camera will simply align with this game object. So I'm just going to call it as head pose, not ps, head pose. I will explain it later. For now, just we have created an empty game object under our head bone. So let me drag our camera under our player game object. So I think we need an animator controller. So I'm just going to create an animator controller, uh, just calling it as player animator. I'm just going to drag it onto our animator component and double click to open it inside animator window, and we need some parameters. So I'm just going to call it as x move, and the second one is y move. So here we need an blend tree. So I'm just going to create an blend tree, uh, calling it as movement, and inside this blend tree, I'm just going to change this blend type to 2D simple directional. uh, uh, in this parameter field, I'm going to change it as y move, and add some motion field. I'm just going to quickly fill this out. Okay, as you can see, I have filled my motion fields and as well as our parameters. If we preview our uh, animation, you can see everything is uh, I think this is okay for me. Now now it's time to create some scripts. So I'm just going to create an uh, script which will handle our player. So I'm going to just call it as FPS controller. We also want two more scripts. Let me create those scripts. One is called FPS controller input, and the last one is called FPS animation controller. I'm just going to double click to open it inside our code editor. Uh, so inside our FPS controller script, we need reference of our FPS controller input, and just grab the reference inside awake function. Now inside our FPS controller input, I'm just going to create some function that will return our inputs. These are our public functions. So public vector2. I'm just going to name it as get move axis. So this function will simply return vector2. So we are just going to use Unity's input axis. So these are input axes which we can see here inside project setting and project manager, input manager. So we can see here we have our horizontal and vertical axis, and we also have our mouse x and mouse y axis. So we are going to use this. You can see the horizontal axis are right, left, right, ad keys, and you get the idea. Back to our script, and inside this we are just returning input.get axis horizontal, and the second one is called input.get axis vertical. Similarly, we are going to create another function to return our mouse axis. So I'm going to just name it as get mouse axis. So here we can simply write mouse x and mouse y. So inside our FPS controller script, we need a variable. I'm just going to simply tag it as a serializable field so we can see inside inspector. So this is type of float, and I'm just going to call it as move speed, and just going to default it as 10. And as we are dealing with the physics, so I'm going to use our fixed update function. Before using our fixed update function, I'm just going to grab our rigid body reference. Side awake, we are going to grab the reference. Now we have our reference. Let us create a fixed update. So inside fixed update, I'm going to just check if our FPS controller input dot get move axis, not mouse axis, move axis dot magnitude is greater than 0, then obviously we are moving. And I'm just going to change our velocity. We are just changing velocity of our rigid body. As you can see, I'm just multiplying our vertical axis by our transform dot forward vector, and multiplying it by our move speed, and our transform dot right vector by our horizontal axis. And we also want our player to affect by gravity, so that's why I am multiplying my transform dot up vector by rigid body dot y. So we also want an else if statement. Inside this statement, we're just going to check if we are not moving. Let me explain. When we are moving, we are inside this condition, and when we are not moving and our velocity is not equals to zero, then we need to change it to zero. So else if our rb dot velocity dot z is not equals to zero, or our rb dot velocity dot x is also not equals to zero, then we need to make them zero. So rb dot velocity equals to vector 3 dot up, uh, but we want our player to affected by gravity, so that's why I am multiplying our up vector by rb dot velocity dot y. So when we are not moving, we definitely go inside this else if statement when our velocity is not equals to zero. That's why I have created this uh, else if statement. So now let's get back to Unity editor and attach our scripts. Let's hit play. So as you can see, so here problem is nothing but when we are moving forward right or forward left, our speed is increased little bit. So to prevent this, we are just going to um, FPS controller input script and just normalize this vector. So we will get a normalized vector. Okay, now you can see now our movement is better. So we need to just implement logic to animate our player. So inside the FPS animation controller, so we need to grab a reference for our animator. So and I'm going to create some integers that will store our hash IDs of our parameters. Let me show you. So Unity will create a function for us that will simply convert this string into an hash ID. So we can use these functions to uh, get the hash IDs of that parameter. So now we have our hash IDs. So this function will take a vector 2 as a parameter. I'm just going to update our parameters. So anim dot set float. So inside this class, I'm just going to reference our FPS animation controller. So now we have our reference. Let's call that function which we have created inside the FPS animation controller class. And just feed our FPS controller input move axis. Let's hit play and okay. First we need to assign this. Just we need to attach our FPS animation controller onto this game object. Now we hit play. Okay, now animations are working fine. Wait, I will show you. So as you can see, our animations are uh, working fine. Now it's time to create some camera logic. So we have created an empty game object under our head bone, as you can see. Let me show you why I have created this empty game object under our head bone. Uh, so when we are placing our camera directly onto our head bone, so let me hit play. As you can see, we obviously don't want uh, this kind of FPS controller. So that's why I have created this empty game object. Now what we are going to do, we are just inherit position of this game object and copy onto our camera game object. So we just want the position of this game object. Uh, because we have control over this game object, we will adjust this. So let me show you inside script. So let me create some um, reference for this head bone and sorry, head pose and camera game object. So now we have our head pose reference and camera reference. Let me create another function. Now we are just going to call it inside update function. Okay, we also want variable for controlling our camera speed. So I'm just going to create another float. So now we are going to hit play. So now you can see we are just inheriting the position of that game object, the head pose game object, and there is no weird rotation. So that is cool. Okay, now we need to implement our camera rotations. So just go back inside our FPS controller class and I'm just going to write some code. So to rotate our player, I'm just going to simply write transform.rotate. So this function will take an vector 3 and second parameter is an angle. So I'm just going to feed it transform.up, and the angle which we are going to use, that is our FPS controller input dot get mouse axis, that is our x mouse axis, and multiply it by our camera sensitivity. So now as you can see, our player is rotating. Okay, now we also want our x rotation. So to rotate around x axis, we need an variable. So we are going to subtract in each and every frame by our FPS controller input class. If you want your rotation to inverse, then simply replace it with the plus sign. So we are just going to change our camera local rotation by returnian dot euler dot mouse axis, and I'm going to just multiply it by our camera sensitivity. Okay, we need to limit our rotation. So as you can see, there is no limitations. So we need to clamp our rotation. I'm just going to create an variable. So here we are just going to clamp it. Now you can see our logic is working fine, and we have created our FPS controller. So hope you like this video. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos.